learn language by what we see and what we hear. The internal critic has a language, and whatever that language is being used internally is what's the language that you've been indoctrinated to tell yourself. You even said it. You grew up in the church, so there's a set of things that you learn that you should or shouldn't say, or should or shouldn't do, that is constantly talking to you based off of the language you picked up from these people. In the same way, if you know that that's the case, it is what you see and what you hear. So the first thing, which I said earlier, is get around people who are what you're wanting to be. You have your cliques, and then eventually you start having nomenclature around those cliques. You start having lingo, and then eventually that embeds in you. So I would say tangibly for you, Danny, but I also think it's for me and for everybody else listening, is if you want to change that dialogue, change what you're seeing and what you're hearing.
Welcome back to the Triggered AF podcast. This is the number one place to explore the triggers that shape our lives with raw honesty and unfiltered conversations. Get ready to laugh, cry, and discover something new about yourself. You can keep spiraling or deal with your triggers. It's your choice. But if you're with us today, it just might mean you're ready to deal with yours. So let's tap on in. I am so excited. I'm always so excited. I love doing this podcast. It's amazing. And every time we get to have all these prolific, game changing individuals on here, I still pinch myself because I don't know how they keep agreeing to do this podcast, but I'm very excited. Today, we have with us the managing partner at 1888 Ventures, Charles Robinson. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for
Yay!
taking time out of, I'm sure, your very busy schedule to chat with us today.
Absolutely, I'm excited to be here, and like I said to y'all earlier, y'all looking good. So I'm so happy to be on this podcast with y'all, with such an amazing group of women.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Welcome, welcome.
Listen, now you carry all the titles and all the roles, and even though you like to be a little inconspicuosity, yes, I know that's not a word, y'all, but it's my word, okay? Everybody had to make up something. So now you do all the things, right? Okay, a husband, father, COO of Forward Cities. You are the founding partner of Teamworks, and y'all just raised 65 million in the Series E. Like, you do all the things, including being a managing partner of 1888 Ventures. So you got all the titles, all the roles, all the things. But outside of the things that you do, who is it that you say you are?
Oh, great question. I would say I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a friend, and I'm an explorer. I would consider myself somebody. The reason why I try all these different things is because I want to just explore and see what will happen. At the end of the day, that's what I would consider myself these days, outside of the accolades.
Okay. So as an explorer, has that gotten you in trouble? Because I know for me, exploring has gotten me in a little bit of trouble sometimes.
Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah, like the adventure part always gets you in trouble, and the reality is you bump your head and you learn, or you spend too much money trying stuff out. But yeah, 100% gets me in trouble. But that's why I got family. That's why I got family like you in my life to keep me on that straight and narrow.
Well, we want to dive on in today. We want to talk about the fear of judgment. And like just about every episode, we kind of have sprinkled this conversation in here and there, but we kind of wanted to package it up nicely for our listeners just to really give some direction and some tools and some tips and some ways to shift their mentality around that fear of judgment, because people confuse the fear of failure with the fear of judgment. Like, you think it's that you're afraid to fail, but you're more so afraid of the judgment that might come from that, or the judgment of you trying something else, or what
Yeah.
he's going to say, what your mom's going to say, what the people on Instagram are going to say. Like, especially now in this world where everyone's voices, we're so inundated with it because of social media. It just makes us just so prone to that fear. So, what are some things that you have hesitated to pursue because, if any, because of fear of judgment or fear of what anybody might say?
Yeah, I want to double click on that, distinction between fear of failure and fear of judgment, because I think we've kind of tokenized fear of failure um, almost like a tagline to kind of navigate certain aspects, and then you still not doing what you're supposed to be doing because of your fear of judgment. So it's
Right.
kind of like you cloak yourself in this fear of failure, but the reality is you're just doing half mass versus stepping fully into your purpose. I love that you made a distinction. For me, I would say, and I hope most entrepreneurs who step into this realm can hear me when I say this, is when I first stepped out, one of the things that I was afraid to do as an early entrepreneur was get a second job. I was out here struggling, trying to make things work
Yeah.
as an entrepreneur to make the perception as if I was looking, like this full time Mark Zuckerberg, name
Hmm.
whatever entrepreneur who's quote unquote doing their thing. But the reality was, I'm over here making $26,000 a year, and I'm over here trying to like look as if I'm like going through the motions and
Yeah.
knocking things out. When reality is, with my skill set and talent and where I went to school, like I could have easily got a job and would have been comfortable, and I still would have been able to execute on my role as an entrepreneur and pursuing different things. But my fear of judgment was people would look at me and say, "Oh, he's not really about that life." But one
Mm.
thing I've uncovered, you know, when I look behind the scenes, most people deal with the fear of judgment. And that's quite frankly the reason why people are unsuccessful, is because, and I said this before in the interview, whenever we pursue anything, it's just a one of one. It has nothing to do with the performer, it has nothing to do with the sales, it has nothing. Some of that stuff has to do with it, but the reality is when you face those problems, there's a solution for every problem. But you have to decide that dialogue that happens internally to pursue that. And that's one thing that I would say for me early on, I would have done to make sure like I would have had what I needed to not struggle. Obviously, I got through with it, but it could have gone bad. Like something could have went left where I couldn't have like climbed my way out of this to have this story that we're talking about now on the business front. But I would have done that, and that's something I think I didn't do because of my fear of judgment. That's just one of the many things.
Yeah, because it is a thing, especially in the entrepreneurial community. It's like, oh, well, if you're working another job and you're not a full time entrepreneur, you're not serious about what you say you believe in. And it's like, no, I could be serious as hell and still want lights to, like, I want it to, when I flip the switch, I want them bitches to come on. Like, when I'm hungry, I want to be able to go down into the refrigerator and there be food that I've purchased, not stolen, that I can cook for my family or eat for myself. Like,
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even just about the survival aspect. Sometimes you want to look good while doing it. And
that's a thing
most
too.
of the time, people will look at that and say, "Oh, well, you're not making enough money in your business to be able to do it, so you had to get a job." But I'm telling y'all now, most of the people that y'all see who are doing these things literally either have a job or they have a lot of debt. And I promise you, if the one thing that I try to remind myself is, one, I don't want to go broke trying to look rich. Two,
Yeah.
I don't want to try to live a lie, because that just continues to burn you out. It'll
Yeah.
continue to take you down a path of uh, of fear, a path of non-acceptance, etc. So I
Yeah.
100% agree with you on that.
Yeah. So then what are you suggesting? I think you gave one already where it's like, hey, don't be trying to go broke looking rich. And it's okay if you need to work, a primary job while you're also building your dreams. But what are some other ways that you suggest people do overcome that fear of judgment so that they can live a life that better aligns for them?
That's a great question too. And for me, we learn language based off of what we see and what we hear. We've been doing it since children.
Yeah.
And I think most of the time we forget that that language continues as adults.
Mm,
And the way that we receive that internal dialogue that happens for us, for that internal judgment that we're talking about, is based off of what we see and what we hear. So
hmm.
I know most people have heard this if you've been in any type of self improvement book or anything like that. Is the people you keep around you.
Yeah.
And you want people that's going to constantly encourage you, constantly hype you up, and get you right on the path that you want to go. And most of the time, we're feeding ourselves with negativity, we're feeding ourselves with gossip. And the
Mhm.
thing is, it feels good at the moment because it's fun. Like you scroll through Instagram, you talk about this, you talk about the Drake Kendrick beef, you talk about what's going on with Diddy. I know that's not a word we can't say right now, but
No
it's like
diddy.
there's a lot of stuff. Yeah, no Diddy. But there's a lot of things that happen in our lives that we are not. I don't want to use the negative. That we can be proactive on, and
Yeah.
we're choosing to allow to coast. And I think if we take more measurement of the things that we're receiving internally from our eyes and ears, that will automatically shift what we tell ourselves
Hmm.
in regards to that judgment conversation. So, one of the things I would say to answer your question directly is start to get people around you who are doing what you aspire to be.
Yeah.
And I always say the second part is just be it. Don't act it. Don't
Mhm.
um, fake it till you make it. Just be. And then from that perspective, everything will follow through because I'm a firm believer that there's two creations. The first creation is what happens here. The
Mhm.
second creation is in the physical, which stands within time and effort and all of those things. So it's just a matter of time before you actually become who you have already started to become mentally. So like for myself, there are certain aspects of myself that I said like, you know what? This is who I am. And I just
Yeah.
do it and then it eventually becomes that.
Yeah. So it's like making a decision. Like instead of, oh well, I want to be Danny. I'm a steal yours because this is what I want you to start saying. But instead of well, I want to be a stand up comedian. It's no, I'm a stand up comedian. And instead of waiting until you're completely comfortable or you're no longer scared, it's going to sign up for amateur night because this is what I decided I am.
Yeah, and I will even double back on that since we, double clicking with Danny. It's not even about having to sign up for amateur night. This is what comedians do. It's like I'm
Okay.
like,
Mhm.
hey, I'm a comedian, so I'm just doing what I normally do. It's not like, oh,
Yeah.
I have to sign up for comedian night to become a comedian.
Yeah.
No, I'm a comedian, and that's what comedians do. Like, I'm the best comedian that's ever done. Like, when you
Yeah.
literally put your mind in that, your actions start to move as if there is
Yeah.
no contemplating or boosting your head up to do it. It's just like, oh, this is what Dave Chappelle would do. This is what anybody would do.
But
So I'm
how
gonna.
do you get there? Like we're obviously going to talk about the external judgment, but it's not always the external judgment. Sometimes it is that inner critic that's cussing us
It
out and
is.
telling us that we can't do stuff. I feel like for me personally, like we're secretly having this conversation for me. Um and the audience, if they benefit, great, but like I am a person who struggles a lot with fear of judgment from just my own healing journey and my own expensive therapy sessions. I have learned that my upbringing, especially like growing up in the church and coming from a Jamaican background, that's a culture based very much on how things look as opposed to what they are.
Yeah.
And then growing up as the church family who has the church, there was a lot of pressure on me to kind of like always take in and be conscious of what people think. So it has translated into this like thing where I'm constantly in a space of convincing myself why I can't, or being like, oh, but it's going to look like this, or oh, this person's going to say that, or this is going to look like this. And I will literally feel it and know it and know that I'm damn good at it, but will still come up with all the excuses. So, how do you suggest that we as in me, go about changing our inner critic to our inner champions? Like, how do we start to override the self doubt and you know what I mean? Like, what are some
100%.
ways
Yeah.
what is like some steps or something specific as opposed to just being like, yeah, it sounds good to be like, yeah, that's what Dave Chappelle do, so that's what I'm gonna do. But like, how do I actually make the switch?
I love you asked that question. So y'all remember what I said? We learn language by what we see and what we hear.
Yeah.
The internal critic has a language, and whatever that language is being used internally is what's the language that you've been indoctrinated to tell yourself. You even said it. You grew up in the church, so there's a set of things that you learn that you should or shouldn't say, or should or shouldn't do.
Right.
that is constantly talking to you based off of the language you picked up from these people. In the same way, if you know that that's the case, it is what you see and what you hear. So the first thing, which I said earlier, is get around people who are what you're wanting to be. Is get around comedians. Like comedians hang around comedians.
Yeah.
So the first thing I would say is if you are a comedian, and I always we always say like the normies, like there's
Yeah.
like there are people who are not comedians that comedians would say are normies. I have friends who are like professional comedians, like to this day, who only hang out with comedians sometimes.
Mm.
And when they hang out with me, they're still like my friend. They're dope. They do all the cool things, what they do, but then they go into their comedian friends and they talk and they have the dialogue.
Mm.
Just like when we grew up, because I grew up in church too. You
Mhm.
have small groups, and then you have your I was going to say a very specific name, but I won't. And then it's like you have all of these
The
different
clicks.
things. Yeah, you have your cliques,
Yeah.
and then eventually you start having nomenclature around those cliques. You start
Mhm.
having lingo,
Yeah.
and then eventually that embeds in you. So I would say tangibly for you, Danny, but I also think it's for me and for everybody else listening,
Mhm.
is if you want to change that dialogue, change what you're seeing and what you're hearing. And I'm not, you don't have to just
Yeah.
do it only through audiobooks. But if you have to and you don't have friends right now, get audiobooks and start listening to, Dave Chappelle's.
Mhm.
I'm don't throw him because he's the GOAT in my eyes. But
Same.
get around comedians or just hit up friends and say, yo, I want some comedian friends. 'Cause I got some comedian friends right now I can introduce you to that you can connect with, and you can start this conversation about what you're going through. That's part A. Part B, tangibly to get to that eyes and ears. What you just did right now, say out loud. Because when you say it out loud, the universe will automatically open. Have you ever read The Alchemist?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you haven't, I recommend that book for the listeners. Start to say it out loud and say exactly what it is that you are. One, it's not saying like I'm becoming this.
Yeah.
It's just who you are. And then two, when you say it out loud, the universe will bring people, i.e., this is a serendipitous moment, but it'll put people in front of you that will share with you just the pieces that's necessary for you to take that next step.
Yeah.
And
That's
that's for
so
everybody, not
true.
just you.
No, no, it's really true. And even sometimes the saying it out loud part, like I think the first time I've ever said it out loud in a public, well, this will be a public platform once we share it to YouTube and all the places. The first time I said it was on a previous podcast. And I've just never said that out loud so that a lot of people can hear. Like only very close,
Yeah.
intimate people know that about me. So like even just saying that you're saying this stuff and you're just, and I feel it in my body. So
Yeah.
that's something that I would give to people is just like pay attention to your body and how your body responds. Like I feel the tension in my chest. I feel like, oh my God, no, 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 no. Like my body's doing that. Like I can feel
Yeah.
so I'm very like mind body connection conscious. And so get curious about how your body's responding to things and how to start figuring out where the resistance is rooted in,
Yeah.
like where, because that's for me what I do to work through these moments that I have when I want to try something new. And for me to actually do it, I'm always like, oh, why do I feel like that? Like why do I feel like I can't?
You know?
Getting curious about the self-doubt and where it comes from so that you can start having the conversation with what I call my higher self to figure out, okay, what needs to shift in that mentality for me to overcome and do it, as opposed to just feeling like I have to stay like this because it's how my mind is already wired.
Yeah.
There's a book I recommend that is really strong for what you just said, and it's one of my favorite books. It's called The Courage to Be Disliked.
Ooh.
And the piece that you're talking about is what most people go through. And I'll just give the snippet of like the core operating system of the book is that there's really only one problem. Whether it doesn't matter whether it's money, the root of everything, all problems stem from personal interrelationship problems. That's it.
Hmm.
And from the book, it just has a dialogue between this sage and this kid, and they're having this dialogue back and forth, and it gives really strong things. But one of the things, excuse me, one of the things you mentioned that speaks to this is when you have those moments and that feeling, this is where encouragement comes from,
Mm,
to get that courage to move forward with your friends. So that's the part, and that's where the encouragement comes from, to get the courage to move forward when you have these things internally. That physical feeling, because it doesn't change. It doesn't matter who you are or where you are. That's going to happen. But
yeah.
if you have your people in your corner to encourage you, that's where those positive things can come into play.
Yeah, I will say so. And so for our listeners, Charles and I, we grew up together. We're god brother and god sister. Our parents loved each other. We're intertwined for so many years. I remember I used to go to their house, and there there were quite a few boys, and they would be throwing my little ass from one side of the room to the other. It was wild. They were so brutal.
Yeah, it was crazy.
It
You
was,
like literally that's the part I didn't know if I could share.
oh
Like
yeah,
how yeah, like those are things, is like, because like you and I, like Alicia and I knew each other like before we were
diapers.
born.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then like literally like grew up with each other, like I don't know
like
any other word
siblings.
to say, like every step of the way we grew up with each other. So
Yeah,
and we know each other's life from the beginning of the beginning,
yeah.
before everything starts to come into place. So there's a definitely love and intimate relationship there.
Yeah. And it just it reminded me when you were saying that first piece, which is to get in community with other people. Because like we all have said, grew up in the church, and my church experience was just full of a lot of abuse. And so because of that, and for me it was physical abuse. Like there were so many people in the church that I grew up with who slammed me up against walls, who punched me, who slapped me, who I mean, this one extremely large woman, she beat me so like a hit from her was so incredibly painful. Mind you, I'm like 117 now. Back then I was like 87, maybe 90 pounds soaking wet. And so to have a woman who's 300 plus pounds to beat you, and they're angry, not even angry with me, but angry with my mother for something my mother did. And so they're taking it out on me physically. So many of those experiences I have growing up. So I had, once I turned 18, I'm like, oh, I'm free. And what I realized ooh, no, bitch, we are not free. I was so bogged down by the upbringing, by the I think just I called it cruelty. It wasn't brutal, but it was just cruel because many times I was getting beat because they did not like my mother. Because my mother's a spicy one. That lady is spicy. And she got a slick mouth, just like her child, and her grandchild. So a lot of times because they couldn't beat her, because my mama also is a fighter. Like I got it honest. My mama will fight you. She will fight you with a brick. She will fight you with a Pyrex pot. She broke a Pyrex pot over somebody's face before. Like the woman is she's that woman. So they wouldn't be able to fight her. So instead, they would beat me. And so growing up with that feeling as though you're not good enough to be loved for real, I thought I was ugly. There were just so many things that I had told myself that when I turned 18, not only did I say, okay, I'm gonna need to get a therapist because I think I'm free, but I am definitely not free because all of the indoctrination that I have is plaguing my life, number one. And number two, the only way I'm going to get out of this is if I build relationships in other communities. So that number one piece that you said, get in community with folks who are doing what you want to do, that transformed my entire life. Once you get in community and you are consistently in community to where you do know the nomenclature, like many of my friends who are females, they are multi-million dollar women. They are New York Times bestselling authors because in my mind, I'm a New York Times bestselling author. Y'all just haven't seen the book yet. Like I haven't released it yet, but in my mind, I am already there. Not a, I'm going to be, but no, it's happening. And once you get in those communities, you can't help but to change everything because you start to say it out loud. And then with those two, the other one that I would add, yes, Danny, I love the piece where you were like, figure out in your body where it feels, and then get the book that Charles suggested called The Courage to be Disliked. The next thing I would say is you are going to need some mental health supports. especially if you are constantly dealing with an inner critic. Now, traditional therapy might not work for you, but you have Reiki, you have yoga, there's tapping. Like, you need to figure out which form of therapy that you need to literally help to support all of the external changes that you're making, because that piece there cannot be forgotten, because it took years and thousands of dollars in therapy for me to overcome the mental piece of what I had experienced as a child, because there was so much physical abuse, and then the verbal things that would be said. Well, oh, you'll never be nothing. Oh, you just like your mama. Oh, you this. Oh, you that. Man, fuck you. I am everything I say and feel I am, and we just gonna move from there. But that took therapy for me to get to that point.
Yeah. And Charles, what was it for you as far as your kind of turning point when it came to the things that you decided to pursue? Because I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say I'm sure dad, your daddy, your great granddaddy, your great 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 granddaddy didn't, pursue those things and lay a blueprint out for you. I'm just guessing here. So where do you feel like that tenacity? Like, can you tell us just a little bit more about your journey so that this can make a little sense for our audience? Like, what were some of the things that kind of helped move you forward and kind of take those risks and, silence that inner critic to go for something that, like I said, I'm sure you didn't have a blueprint for?
Yeah, for sure. And most people won't have a blueprint from our community. And I mean, our community, I mean, the Black community. Like, I don't know too many people who could say, if they do,
Right.
they're a rarity. But I would say, and Alicia knew this, like, I was always in some way, shape, or form until like high school. I was like that nerdy kid with the big glasses, big head, hadn't grown into my body. And, I really wanted to be accepted. So I kind of, and this is just sharing my personal story, I kind of started out by myself. And I think this piece will resonate with a lot of folks because the empathy I have, even just thinking about people that's probably listening to this, is their question is like, how do I actually get into the room with people who I want to aspire to? Because the reality is, I'm starting from way over here. I have no clue to even get in that room. Like, how do I get to a Danny? How do I get to Alicia? And even if I do that, like, they're probably not going to have enough time to give it to what I need to become friends. So I say all that to say is, for me, the turning point, it started when I was at the Redskin field and I missed All Star. I know this is crazy, but this is kind of like sharing like some real personal stuff. And I had missed All Stars and I cried. And my brothers made it. My brothers always were like the cool kids out of the family. And it's funny how like things turn out. But um, I was crying and, you know, I knew like I was wrong. Well, I felt like I was wronged, right? And my uncle told me, he was like, no, we playing some big time ball. And it wasn't even about sports at the time. And for me, I told myself that day that whatever it is that I wanted, I will never not make it or I will never not get it. And it was out of fear initially. That's how it started. Everything started out of fear. So I over asked questions. I over asked, and this is, I'm telling you the toxic side. I over asked questions. I over asked, am I good enough? I overworked to see if I was good enough. I put myself in the room and just sat quiet just to listen, even if I didn't even understand it. I just listened to everybody's words and how they talked and what language they used and all of that other stuff. And then I realized, like, okay, they're not smarter than the people that I know. The key attribute is the people that are most successful consistently execute on the tasks that are in their path, regardless of their life circumstances. Someone dies, they execute. Someone misses a flight, they execute. Someone does them wrong and they're upset and hurt and they're crying and sending an email and execute. Like, literally for me, when I understood, going back to your original question of the turning point, that it had nothing to do with intelligence, had very little to do with money, somewhat to do with relationships. At the core is like, are you going to get the shit done or not? And regardless of that happens, then going back to the relationship piece to kind of close this thing out, I started out, my friends were books. I was reading 52 books a year, and my community was uh, The Alchemist. My community was Naval Ravikant. My community was Ryan Holiday and the Daily Stoic. Like, I literally just surround my friends. I literally would just, everywhere I went, I was listening to audiobooks. And I'm like, okay, okay, like a nerd, like you would normally think. Neil Strauss, in the game. It's like so many things. So I stopped there to give those two pieces where the turning point was for me.
So that question was not on our list of questions. I just felt compelled to ask it. And I'm so happy I did
Yes.
because one, it just resonated with me on so many levels. And two, I have never heard that advice before. And we are on episode 100 and something.
100 and some. Like 30,
And there
130, I think.
yeah, there's so much in there that just has never been said on this podcast, or I'm not sure if anywhere in that way. And I love the piece about like your friends were your books. Like you don't got to go to every conference this year, sis. You don't have to go into every room. And yes, there's a time for that. But the what you're really saying is you rewired your brain. Like you literally just like were like, oh no, this wiring is not serving me. I'm going to rewire my brain with something else. And that's what, like, and that goes back to your original point of what you're taking in and what you're digesting and what you're listening to and what's happening around you is what's affecting that internal state. And I'm so happy you said that because there is this pressure, it feels like sometimes, to go and make all these friends and build these relationships. But when you're not really ready for that, then you end up going in and like you're not being authentic and you're not being genuine because you're just seeking to see what you can gain and what you can take as opposed to building yourself up so that by the time you're in those spaces it just comes to you. You're just attracting it because you have the mentality, you have the energy, you have the scope to fully understand what's happening. So you're not kind of going in there as like this person who needs so much. You're going in there with someone that has something to offer and of value. So I'm so happy you gave that example because it just, I feel like for a lot of people it can take that pressure off of feeling like they have to do so much and focus more on who they're trying to be, like that's just awesome.
Yeah, and I just want to just double click again on that for people to understand is like when you become that person, your actions, and keyword on actions is what will come through. And I think the difficulty, because we're in the Instagram social media era, we become more academics versus practitioners. And you can quote whatever it is you want to quote, and you
Yeah.
can theorize the idea of what an entrepreneur is. There's probably more people out here right now who could theorize entrepreneurship, but hasn't had a quarter of action in comparison to what I've done. 90% of the things that I do, and I'm not saying take this philosophy because it's gotten me in trouble, but I'm a ready, fire, aim person, and everybody has to decide who they want to be. I will hear a little bit and take action, and then I'll theorize and then see if that will work out. But I
Yeah.
want people to understand very, very clearly. And if you want a litmus test, you know, do things like 75 hard or something like that. And you don't have to do anything like this. I'm just saying do something that requires you to take action consistently for like 75 to 90 days, and then you'll see literally why you haven't done so. And I do this all the time. I do the litmus test for myself 90 days all the time. And what I realize, like where I drop the ball is my kids, right?
Mm.
Like if my kids have things that they need to get done, then I'll drop what I'm doing or I'll get frustrated and I have this dialogue and I may not do it when I say I'm gonna do it. That's
Mm.
one. Whereas there are certain billionaires, they will sacrifice that. And then you start getting deeper into the root of like, what is it you really want to be?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because it requires a certain layer of sacrifice. And that's where it has the self awareness to say, okay,
Mm.
I'm not willing to sacrifice this to get that. And I'm okay with that. That's part A. So start with doing consistent action to give yourself a litmus test on where you really are. Because if you can't do that, you're lying to yourself and you just stay in this, dream induced la la land forever, and you'll get enough stuff to play the status game, and then you'll end up in your 70s where none of that stuff matters, and then you have regret. And the thing that really boils down to is like, if I'm saying I'm this, start doing action, and then there's something that's going to come up where you have to prioritize either the action or whatever that thing came up, whether that's the how you look, how your girlfriend perceives you, your boyfriend perceives you, your wife, husband, etc. And then you have to decide, no, this is a higher priority. I'm gonna sacrifice this and then keep going.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what's in the water in Sarasota, but I could tell that you and Alicia graduated from the same school of life. Okay.
Yes, because that's me. I tell Danny all the time, all this hemming and hawing, we need to
And
learn
then
it and
that's what I
immediately
was gonna say
execute.
next. I was just like, because I know I literally was about to say because it seems like the hemming and hawing don't happen in Sarasota.
I mean, for it
What's
does
for
for a
us,
lot
like,
of people. For us,
well,
no.
yeah, like literally, Alicia and I had, like, we went through a lot, and I'm not gonna, like,
A
that's
lot.
just personal, and I'm not gonna even dive into that piece. We could
Yeah.
probably have that conversation offline. But when I say we went through a lot,
A lot.
I mean a lot, like emotional, like to your core
Yeah.
pain, like a lot of those things. And then when you get stripped of all of the fear of what that type of pain looks like,
Cause you
none of
Mhm.
know
that
it.
stuff matters. Like then at that point, it's
What
like,
you
all
gonna
right,
do?
shit, I'm gonna cry anyways. Fuck it, I might as well. I'm
Exactly.
gonna keep, like, nobody cares because nobody
Nobody
showed up.
cares. It's not real.
Nobody
None of it
cares.
is real. I'm gonna do what I want to do.
Nobody cares. So when you hear the hemming and hawing to Alicia's, nomenclature, it's like, then I think to myself, as far back as I possibly can go in the deepest, darkest parts of myself
Mhm.
in comparison to the hemming and hawing that I'm hearing. I'm like, okay, I want to empathize with you because I love you.
Yes.
Nobody cares
Nobody cares. What are
whether
you
you
gonna
do
do?
it or don't. And
That's
that was part of the question I was going to answer. There was one of the questions that I was thinking about, like the internal critic. It's like 3 generations after that, nobody's going to remember you.
Nobody's gonna
You
remember
die.
it.
3 generations after you die, no one's going to remember you. I guarantee it.
crazy. And like we're so focused on like what everyone's saying right at this moment. And it's just
Yeah.
Alicia has helped me so much with that area of my life just to be like, nobody gives a fuck. Like it just really doesn't matter.
It
And
does.
it's just such a powerful space to operate from because you just get to really step into yourself like that is really what
Mhm.
it means to be yourself like to just
Yeah.
not care to realize that nobody's thinking about you like nobody is like focused on like because everyone is really focused on themselves like
Yes.
everyone is wrapped up in their own little worlds with their own problems and it's just like nobody cares like that you want to launch your business like nobody's just like going to sleep like oh man I hope like she doesn't make it like nobody
They
cares.
don't. And I will say this too, because y'all are. I would consider Danny to be a part of Tribe because you're so close to
Yes.
Alicia, and Alicia
She's
is my
tried.
family. I will give you this. Even this conversation we're having now about, like, no one cares has become academic. Like, the
Mm.
piece I want to uncover, so we do not miss the reality of this, is that there is action that has to be required
Yep.
for this to be real. So
Yes.
when you say nobody cares, cool, we can theorize what that means, but
Hmm.
there's a specific action that you have to say, okay, today I'm going to sign up for stand up. And literally, you're going to have all of those
Oh
emotions
god
and
I was
things
gonna
like
say
that.
oh god here go those
Yep.
feelings
But
again.
listen, this is the
I'm like,
academic exercise right here, right? But then you're going to jump on and you're going to have the interviews and conversations with your friend, but nobody cares. All right, cool. Nobody cares.
now what?
Sign up for something. Sign up for something today. And
Today.
the thing is like, literally you have to do that today, because the reality is, it's like, when you,
So
like
true.
I said before, going back to what I said, we don't make this academic. And this is for all your listeners as well, because I know y'all are having the same conversations.
Yeah.
We don't want to make this academic. The reality is, there's the one thing for true is that nobody's getting out of this alive. We have a one-way ticket for as long as we know.
Yep.
No one's getting out of this alive. And if you know that every single day, knowing that you have a first class ticket to death,
First
and
class.
I hate making this, very morbid, but that's so freeing. If you haven't had as much pain and suffering that you made it through, at the core, we all have a universal ticket that says we're all going to die,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? And what we have to do with that, and you don't have to do it, you can just coast through bliss, because there's some beauty in ignorance, like just
Oh
not,
yeah.
there's some fun and things like that, but there's not
And
purpose.
some ease that comes
There's
with that.
ease in ignorance. Oh
Yeah.
God, if I
Yeah,
could
there's
get
ease in
on.
ignorance. You know what I'm saying? But the purpose, that's for me how I operate, is
Yeah.
not necessarily just the happiness or the sadness and things like that. It's
Mhm.
purpose.
Yeah.
And if you feel like, hey, this is something I feel, let me explore this, because this
Hmm.
may be your purpose. And you
Yeah.
may be able to reach so many people through your story. And again, don't just come through it with the indoctrination of what you think comedy is. You literally have a one of one fingerprint on what comedy can be for Danny. Literally, nobody else can do it the way you can, whatever. But all in all, I don't want to get too academic. Going back, I don't want to get you away from this. Sign up for something today, and then I know Alicia's gonna hold you accountable.
Show
And then
Liz.
the reality is just go up there and then
Ooh,
talk. You don't even
Yeah.
gotta do something funny. Just talk and say, you know what, y'all? I was on this podcast with this crazy ass black man who had 4 kids from Sarasota, struggled, and told me I need to sign up. So here I am. I promise you, people will laugh at that fear.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
see what I'm saying?
I
hot,
love this. And I
hot.
love you, Charles, because we literally say the same thing. That is my exact saying. Like, no differences. The one thing we all got to do is die. I say it all the time because
Yeah.
it is so true. You worried about how people think and how they feel. Fuck them people. How do you think? How do you feel? What do you want your experience to be? Because nobody's getting out of here alive. Not one person, not even the children that we bear and that we bring into this world. They too have a first class ticket to leaving this place. And I know that is the most painful thing to think about. I get it. It is painful for me too. That's why I'm like, no, let me give you, with my own child, let me give you everything that I can possibly give you. Let me pour myself out so that I can fill you up with as much as I need, because I don't know when it's my time, when my ticket is called. And so when you live like that, there is this freedom that, yes, I'm going to do what I got to do because I believe in intentionality, and I'm gonna enjoy the shit out of this one good life. But there is a lesson that I have always thought, a parable in the Bible that says a prophet is without honor except in his own town, among his relatives, and in his own home, because people get hella familiar and they think that because they know you, that, oh no, you're not who you say you are. And so
Mm.
sometimes you can grow where you're planted, and you can flourish and do all the things. I do believe that is possible. And also, sometimes you need a little bit of a change of an environment, because it's just necessary. So, like, what would you say as, a person who did, move away? You went to Duke, you killed it there too. Met one of my closest friends. Now I love me some Whitney, and just have done all these amazing things. But what would you say are some indicators? Because you worked for a hedge fund and then now you are a managing partner. Like, what would you say are some indicators that it may be time to move, whether it's to a new space, a new city, state, or even to change that environment? What are some indicators?
Well, I would say this. I would shift the indicators, because that will put you in a reactive mode.
Ooh,
And I would
put it all
say
together.
I would say literally everything we said is the operating system for your life to change. One, the language that you pick up is based off of your eyes and your ears.
Mhm.
If you're receiving with your eyes and with your ears something that is not conducive for where you want to go, and you have become, starting at this point, to be that person, and your eyes and ears are not congruent, then you may need to make action.
Mhm.
That action can be where you are or not. Prime example, I love my family. My family is the most important thing to me. And Alicia can tell you, like, even how I spend my time. I don't spend time with people that's not my family. Even if it's like friends, I have to categorize my friends as family
Yeah.
before I spend any type of time with them. So, like, I have a friend that I call family, like Ray. Like, people
Yeah.
know, like, if I'm somewhere, they're like, oh, Ray's somebody that's probably around.
He's nearby.
And so, like, and Martin as well. It's like
Yeah.
these guys are like my friends and also like my family, but that's just how I move. The reason why I give that context is I have to be very conscious with my like immediate family what I share,
Mhm.
regardless of the things I've accomplished. There are sometimes like, with my family, and I won't share, them specifically because I want to protect them. But there are things with my family. They'll share certain things, and I'm like, oh man, like we're sharing like our wins, and I'll share this thing. They'll be like, yo, how you do that? Oh, like what? And it turns into this thing when it could be encouragement to like, how is he doing this? Or it could be like, yo, we got this going on versus that going on. Now I'm not saying there's any animosity because my family loves me and they always support me and they push me up and they lift me up, especially my aunt. And
Yeah.
what I will say though is that when it comes to getting to another place and location and people, it goes back to that operating system. You need to get around the people who is taking you where you need to go. That doesn't mean you get rid of your family. You can't change that. You were born into that. This is who they are. This is part of your coding, and it's part of the purpose of taking your family to another level, even if it's against their will. So that being said, the result of that now it shifts going back to the perspective of indicators. The result of that could be you have moved, you have gone to a different place, you are no longer having as much dialogue about that because you started to focus more on what am I putting in here, what am I putting in here, because like I said before, as soon as you make that switch, you can make that switch today. As soon as you make that switch, you need to go get the programming to keep that switch locked in because that
So
thing will flip
true.
right off real quick.
Yeah.
And the thing is like imagine if you have somebody in your
Alcohol.
house. Here's a prime example for my listeners. You have somebody in your house and you flip the switch on in your house. Anybody in that house can come in and flip that switch off without your permission.
Yes. Yes, they
Think
can.
about it. So yeah, I would say that's probably my perspective when it comes to moving and getting outside of your comfort zone. And when you do that switch, you will automatically realize this ain't it. And then you need to start again. If you can't find people, get some books and make them your best friends. And they will not fail you because most of those people are dead, depending on how far along you're reading on these people, or they're fictional. Like build relationships with those books, have dialogue with those books, think about how they will respond, etc. And then eventually it'll get you to where you need to be.
This was good. I
Oh my
mean,
God. I knew I needed it. I knew I needed it. I just knew it. I was just like, oh, we need to have this conversation. I need to have this conversation. Thank you so much, Charles, for all the gems and just the way that you put it together is I feel like will be so easy for people to digest
yeah.
and to apply, and it just doesn't seem like some magic trick. It's just very practical and it's very basic, and I love the taking things from theory and putting them into action.
Mhm.
It is the thing. It is the thing that
Yeah.
people are missing a lot of times in their journeys and their quest for success and happiness and whatever it is you're pursuing. It's just shortening that time, like we talked about, Alicia, shortening that time
Mhm.
between the thought and the action.
Yeah, yeah, because it's necessary. You can't keep, again, I'm gonna use the word hemming and hawing. You cannot. Either you're gonna make a move or you're gonna sit here and not have what you want. But just know that you will have to die. And it sounds so morbid, and I get it. And it's like, oh, you rude. Yes, I am, just a little bit. But I say it in love. I'm rude in love. You gonna die. And so that when it is time for you to go, and I don't know what the experience is, but when it is time for your soul to transition, you really do want to be like, man, I lived the hell out of this life. I enjoyed this life. I tapped into every potentiality, all the things in me. I used them. Some of them I liked, some of them I didn't. I took a taste of this. I ain't like this. I shifted, I adjusted. I lived my life. My life didn't live me. I lived it. I really, really want to thank y'all so much for joining us. Now, before we leave, Charles, where can we stay connected with you? All the things.
Well, I just said I don't take. I'm joking.
Okay.
No, people can. I'm saying connected with me. LinkedIn. They can hit me
Great.
up. And I think that's probably the
The
best
best way.
way.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm not as active on social media,
No, that's
but
okay. They gonna get enough
I
of
will
you in
say
this
this:
good podcast.
my hope is that if our journeys do cross paths, please stop me, say hello.
Yeah.
I am very curious about hearing your stories, and that's the way I would say is like most of it will probably be in person or crossing paths and saying. So if you hear this and I'm in your city or your state and you recognize me, please stop me and say hello.
Yes, 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 yes. And you can stay connected with me everywhere, all over at Alicia Reese. That's Alechia. Last name Reese, Reese. And we talked about overcoming fear. And Danny and I actually created the 7 Agents of Change pack. You can go right now to www.triggeredafevents.com because it is an event to change your life. The steps are so practical. Trust me, head on over there. You do not want to miss out on that. And you want to get it while it's 90% off because once it goes up, it's up. Danny, where can we stay connected with you?
You can stay connected with me at the Danny Bordeaux. Bordeaux is Bourdeau in all the places. And you can also go to triggeredafpodcast.com so you can stay up to date with the latest on the podcast. But thank you again, Charles, for joining us. You all definitely are in for a treat. So I want to make sure that you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts and on YouTube. Share this with your friends, share this with people that you think could really use it. Share, because that is how we're able to move the needle forward, is touching as many people as we can and sharing some of these things because you think that maybe you know something so everybody knows, and that is just, I am learning, y'all, that is not the case.
No.
People don't be knowing, okay? Just because you be knowing, it don't mean everybody else be knowing. So don't be selfish, don't be stingy, share the wealth. Okay, there's enough to go around. The love and the information, all that is abundant. So we hope you guys enjoyed this episode and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.